Ranjana Yamunatiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhav Jaya Radha Madhav Radha Madhav Jaya Radha Madhav Jaya Radha Madhav Jaya Radha Madhav Radha Madhav Jaya Radha Madhav Jaya Radha Madhav Radha Madhav Radhe Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadra Mai Jaya Sudarshana Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha Lakshmi Narasimha Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Guru Maharaj Jaya Guru Maharaj Guru Maharaj Jaya Guru Maharaj Jaya Jaya Gurudev 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivijakacharya Stotra Sata Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Shri Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivijakacharya Stotra Sata Srimad His Divine Grace Shri Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय ग्रंथ राज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय साम भक्त वृंद की जय निताय गौर प्रेमानंदी हरे all glories to the assembled devotees all glories to the assembled devotees All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga.
बोर्ड शायद दिखा नहीं है, पता नहीं।
तो ऐसे ही पढ़
हाँ, ऐसे ही पढ़ लेंगे विथ मोबाइल। यू टेल द वर्स नंबर।
Okay. So, Prabhu, should I just read it and pray, not repeat the verse? I just read it because it's not on the board.
Whatever you want.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we'll be reading from Canto 2, Chapter 8, Verse 8. Unfortunately, the board is not there today, so I will just read the verse and the purport. Asidyat udarat padmam loka samsthana lakshanam yavan avyam vai purusho yata vaya vai pratak tavam asav iti prokta samsthavaya vayam iva. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Prabhupada. Translation. If the Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whose abdomen the lotus stem sprouted, is possessed of a gigantic body according to his own caliber and measurement, then what is the specific difference between the body of the Lord and those of common living entities? Purport. One should note how Maharaj Parikshit intelligently put questions before his spiritual master for scientific understanding of the transcendental body of the Lord. It has been described in many places before this that the Lord assumed a gigantic body like that of Karunai Dakshaya Vishnu, from whose hair pores innumerable universes have generated. The body of Garbhodaya Vishnu is described as sprouting the lotus stem, within which all the planets of the universes remain, and at the top of the stem is the lotus flower on which Lord Brahma is born. In the creation of the material world, the Supreme Lord undoubtedly assumes a gigantic body, and living entities also get bodies, big or small, according to necessity. For example, an elephant gets a gigantic body according to its needs, and so also an ant gets its body according to its needs. Similarly, if the personality of Godhead assumes a gigantic body to accommodate the universes or the planets of a particular universe, there is no difference in the principle of assuming or accepting a particular type of body in terms of necessity. A living being and the Lord cannot be distinguished simply by the difference in the magnitude of the body. So the answer depends on the specific significance of the body of the Lord as distinguished from the body of the common living being. Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Satsrutas Goswami Tinamine. Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tinamine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschate Shatarine Pancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhayevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasati Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So with all your blessings and good wishes, I will attempt to explain this verse in purport. This verse is from the chapter entitled Questions by King Parikshit. So this is the second question that Maharaj Parikshit asks in this chapter. And before the questions come in, it's the 8th verse. So he actually glorifies the process of hearing, and especially hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam. And then he starts to ask these questions. And he asks about, I think, 20-something questions in this whole chapter. And, related to many different aspects of understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. So some are direct, some are indirect, but they're all related to the Lord. And one of the reasons why he does that is that he wants a clear understanding to be established about all the possible aspects of the Lord. It's not possible to know everything about God, right? But at least the essential elements of understanding God, for that he asks many questions. And in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, when Krishnadas Goswami, Kaviraj Goswami Maharaj, in the 2nd chapter, he explains the Siddhanta of Krishna, right? Why Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then Krishna appears as Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya is therefore the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then he, at the end of the chapter, he recites a beautiful verse. He says, Siddhanta bolye chitte na kori alasa, Iha hoite Krishna lage sudradha manasa. So he's saying that in the matter of understanding Siddhanta, one should not be lazy. So he says, na kore alasa. So one should not be lazy. And if one is not lazy, iha hoite Krishna lage. So if one is not lazy, what will happen? Attachment towards Krishna, sudradha manasa. So sudradha, that means with a lot of determination, one will get attachment for the Lord, Krishna lage. So in the same spirit, right, Parikshit Maharaj is asking these questions. So Prabhupada says in this purport, he says, if because of laziness one does not come to know Krishna conclusively, one will be misguided about the cult of devotion, like those who declare themselves advanced and imitate the transcendental symptoms sometimes observed in liberated souls. And then Prabhupada says, unless one hears from authorities such as revealed scriptures, the bona fide devotees, the spiritual master, one cannot make advancement in devotion to Krishna. And one may also ask another question, that Maharaj Parikshit had only 7 days to live. So he could have just asked, okay, you just tell me about Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. Why all this about time factor and all this creation and so many different things? But this is Maharaj Parikshit's magnanimity, right? His sense of recognition of, in the assembly of the sages, not everyone was a pure devotee. Right? There were also mixed devotees. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he explains that there were all kinds of devotees in that assembly. And to keep everyone's attention, and even if they are not hearing directly about Krishna's pastimes, they are going to hear everything related to Krishna. And that way, they will benefit and they will be raised from the standard that they are at right now in their devotion. So, we can appreciate Maharaj Parikshit's mentality that even in those circumstances, he was not thinking selfishly. He was thinking for the ultimate welfare of everyone who was assembled. And even all his questions, they are not related only to him. Most of the questions are related to the ultimate welfare of all living entities. And in this verse, he's asking the question, what is the specific difference between the Lord's body and the body of common living entities like us? So the Lord assumes different forms. In this verse, as we're talking about the form he takes to create the universes, from Mahavishnu to Garbhodaya Vishnu. So he takes different forms, and then he appears in many forms to carry out his pastimes. He appears in the form of a boar, in the form of a fish, in the form of a human being, in the form of a woman. So naturally the question should be cleared that what's the difference? The Lord is taking a form, the elephant is taking a gigantic form, the ant is taking a little form. So what's the difference in the forms? Are they the same or are they different? So as I said in the beginning, that it's not possible to know all the differences, because you're taking one limitless being, right, which is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and you're trying to compare with a limited being. So there is no limit to the differences, but there are some essential differences described in the Srimad Bhagavatam and our Vaishnava scriptures, and Prabhupada writes elaborately on these differences in his purports. So we will briefly examine some of the key differences. So the first difference is that we take birth according to our karma. So it's described in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Kapil Dev Muni, when he's explaining to his mother, he says the living entity is almost, it's forced by nature, right, to appear in the womb, right, of the mother and unite with the semen. So we don't have a choice in one sense, but our karma dictates our form, the time, the form, everything. So it's explained, it is happening under divine supervision, Daiva Nitrena. Right? So it's happening under divine supervision, and we don't have much choice. According to our karma, we must get a form that is suitable for that karma. So as we sow, so we shall reap. Simple understanding of karma. And so we don't have a choice, right? When we come in, we don't have a choice. Okay, I'll be 6 feet tall, right? I'll have a lot of intelligence, I'll look very handsome. No, we don't have a choice. I'll be very fair. No choice. Right? I'll have blonde hair. We're helpless in that regard. Whatever we get, according to our karma, we are born with that. But when the Lord appears, the Lord doesn't appear according to karma. It said, the Lord himself says, he says, although I'm unborn, he says in the 4th chapter in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, although I'm unborn and I'm aja, right, and I'm transcendental, I appear, he says, sambhavami atma mayaya. He says, I appear according to my own will, my choice. So as per the situation demands, the Lord appears and he chooses the form in which he wants to come to carry out a specific purpose. And but we have no choice. We have a choice in the sense that, yes, by a good karma we may get a good body, good intelligence, but we will still have to take birth. And even if we want to get liberated, we have to take the help of the Lord, because on our own we cannot even be liberated from the cycle of birth and death. The second thing is that our forms, the bodies that we assume, they're all limited in what they can do. Now, I can't see beyond this wall what's happening, right? Nor can you see. You can't see what's happening at the back. And you can't hear what's going out maybe a few meters, a few hundred meters from here. You can't hear what's going on. But the Lord is present in everything. And He's cognizant of everything. He's permeating all the universes. He's in each body as a super soul. He's everywhere. And He's conscious of everything. It's explained that we are only conscious of our body. But I'm not conscious of His body. Right? Or his body or her body. But God is conscious of everybody. And there's a beautiful verse that explains. It said that Angani yasya sakalendriya vritti manti pasyanti panti kalyanti chiram jaganti. So the Lord's form, right, His angani, all His limbs, yasya sakala indriya, His limbs can perform the functions of all the senses. So if the Lord wants, He can taste with His eyes. And Prabhupada often gives in his lectures, he says that when we offer food to the Lord, right, don't think that the Lord is not accepting just because He's not eating with His lips. Said that if He starts to eat, maybe you'll not be able to satisfy it. He may gobble up all the universes. So with His eyes, He's honoring the prasadam. He's honoring the offering and making it prasadam. So this potency the Lord has. And He is maintaining, He is seeing, He's maintaining all the universes. Chiram jaganti. Eternally He is maintaining. So the Lord does not come into being at any time. So even the living entity in one sense does not come into being, but our bodies come into being. But the third difference is that the Lord's body and the Lord are the same. It's not that He's made up of material elements like earth, water, fire, ether, sky, and then He has a subtle body which is different from the gross body. The Lord's body and Him, there's no difference. But for us, there's a difference. We are soul But we are in a vehicle, we are in a body that we acquire according to our karma and in order to satisfy our desires, or at least at some level satisfy. Because ultimately, even in this body, we cannot satisfy materially all the needs of the body. It's not possible. Because ultimately, we are the spirit soul. So Prabhupada says, he says, no matter how much you try to please the senses, he gives the example of a man with many wives. And if you're trying to keep, many wives happy, of course, we all have one wife, and even to keep one wife happy sometimes becomes very difficult. And even for the wife to keep the husband happy becomes one husband very difficult. So but there is a difference between the body and us, and we cannot satisfy, no matter how much we try, we cannot satisfy all the senses materially. So no matter what we have, how much we, try different foods and different places and different clothes and any, length and breadth of diversity and, sensual rushes is never going to satisfy us on the material level. Because the living entity is spiritual in nature. So by trying to satisfy the senses materially, we cannot be satisfied. And the fourth difference is that we are able to create, for example, an offspring, not on our own. We have to take the help of another counterpart. So today, if I think I'm sitting here and I generate many offsprings, I can't do it. Nor can anyone do it. But the Lord doesn't, Lord has a form. Just by His will, millions of universes are coming out of just out of His pores. He's lying. Imagine, to create something, it takes so much effort. Right? But the Lord is like lying on His, back. And from Him, millions of universes are being generated. Like effortless and seamless. Just like when we breathe, we don't think much about our breathing. Right? I'm making such an effort to breathe, except if someone has asthma or some breathing problem, they recognize the difficulty in breathing. But for us, for most normal people, we breathe effortlessly, right, till we get to a certain point. And even then, breathing becomes difficult. So, so we can't create any offsprings on our own. But Lord's body says, Nityo Nitya Nam, Chaitanya Chaitanya Nam, Eko Jo Bahunam, right? So He's generating one eternal, supreme living entity. From Him, millions and billions of living entities are being generated. Just by, His lying down, and just by His will, universes are coming, and then just by His glance, the living entities are activated, the material energy gets activated, and then Lord Brahma appears from his navel. So it's all happening just by His will. But our forms cannot create anything by our will. Right? Just to maintain this body, we have to work so hard. Even if someone inherits a lot of money in this world, right? Lots of property, everything, still they have to work to maintain their bodies. They have to eat timely, right? They have to take care of their health, and even their material resources, they have to manage properly. They can't just, lie down and just think, okay, I'm willing, everything will be fine, so it will be fine. No matter how much capable that person may be, how much wealth one may have, how much beauty, how many degrees, doesn't matter. One has to work in this world to maintain the body. So these forms are these forms can become high maintenance forms if we don't keep our lives simple. By God's design, these forms also not very high maintenance. But the whole material world today, the whole development ideology has made even just basic maintenance of the body so difficult, so complex. This kind of life that we are leading today. Then we don't come in by our choice, and we have to give up these forms out of our choice. So even though we may love our forms, right, we may love our bodies, but at any time we may have to give up these bodies. No matter how healthy one is, no matter how much yoga one does or goes to the gym, or the perfect diet, still one could be walking and just a car comes in, just crashes against you. And these are things that, these are not some, these are things that happen on a daily basis. There is no guarantee when we go out in the car that we are going to come back. And we hear, as we grow older, we see, families, friends, people, ourselves, we have these experiences. That any time we can be forced out according to our karma. So according to our karma, we come in, and then according to our karma, we can just be, but the Lord is not, you can't, the Lord again appears and disappears according to His will. There's no death for Lord. No. His form, because Lord and the form are one. And our bodies are actually material bodies. It's described that that ultimately they are a source of misery. Rishabdev tells his sons, he says, Nunam pramarte kurute vikarma. He says, Yat indriya priti apnaroti. Na sadhu manne yata atmanoyam. Asan api klesada asadeha. So the living entity, maddened by the desires to satisfy the senses, he assumes different forms, and he performs vikarma, kurute vikarma. And Rishabdev is saying that na sadhu manne, it's not befitting a living entity. It's not befitting a living entity. But still, and what they get a form. Asan api klesha asa deha. So deha is full of klesha. That means it's full of problems. So all of us, we have material bodies, and we all have experience how problematic sometimes these bodies can become. Against our will, we may be very healthy, but suddenly we discover that there's some issues, and the body starts to deteriorate. And even if we are healthy, we are only here for a certain time. Right? After a certain age, again the body starts to deteriorate. But the Lord's body doesn't deteriorate. He's never yovanam cha. It's described that that the Lord's, even when He appears in the human form, He's always youthful. And He has dazzling splendor. But our bodies, with time, they begin to wither out, right, and cause a lot of problems. In fact, in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 13th chapter, in the 20 items of knowledge, Krishna explains that this Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadi, right, Dukkha Doshan Anudarshanam, that we must understand this, that this body, there is a fault in this body because it's subject to things that we don't want, right? It's subject to disease, it's subject to death, it's subject to old age, diseases, against our will. So one has to recognize that, because that provides an impetus to find a solution. Today, modern world thinks, okay, this is it. No, you come and you go, and while you're here, you just try to enjoy it to the max. Just eat, sleep, drink, be merry. Because you never know when you may go. But that understanding is incomplete, because even if you eat, drink, sleep, and be merry, again you have to take a form. We'll be forced to take another form in which we'll have to suffer. But the Lord's body doesn't deteriorate like this. And it doesn't get sick. Prabhupada often says, people claim that, I'm the Lord, I'm the Lord. Then why does he have to go to the dentist? Then God will have dental problems? God's body is like that he has to go to the doctor to get treatment. What kind of a God is he? He is dog. Prabhupada says in many of his lectures. And just the last, there are probably many more which maybe some of you can share after the class. That the Lord's form is full of bliss, eternity, and knowledge. Right? It says, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchit Ananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karana Karana. So the Lord's Vigraha, the form, is full of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. But our bodies are exactly the opposite. Some moments of happiness, but though that happiness is temporary, it's not permanent. We are subject to illusion, and our forms are not eternal. We have to relinquish these forms at some time or the other. So it appears that this body is very problematic. And so what is the outlook that as practitioners on the path of devotional service we should have towards this body? Because all of us, because of our different karma, we take birth and acquire bodies with different types of intelligence, different types of beauty, capacity, abilities. So as devotees, as aspiring devotees and practitioners, how should we, what should be our outlook towards the body? And so I will share one pastime of Lord Chaitanya with Sanatana Goswami. This occurs in the Anta Leela. And Sanatana Goswami was living in Mathura, and he was very keen to meet Lord Chaitanya, who was living in Jagannath Puri. And he decided that he would go and see the Lord in Jagannath Puri. And he traveled by foot through the Jharikanda forest in central India, and went through a lot of difficulties. He had to fast a lot. The quality of the water was not that good. And you can imagine, walking 100,000 kilometers, walking 1,000 kilometers, in those kind of conditions, 500 years ago, how difficult it must have been. And his body developed oozing sores due to malnutrition and not getting the right kind of water. And he was thinking that he's going all the way to Jagannath Puri, but because of his bodily condition, he will not be able to go to the temple, because in the temple there will be many other devotees, and you know how temples, when there's so many thousands of devotees, each one touches each other while taking darshan. So he's thinking that I will be offending the devotees, by touching them with these oozing sores. It will be a great offense to these devotees. So he says, I will not be able to go and see Lord Jagannath. And then because Lord Chaitanya also was staying close to the Jagannath temple, he thought that he will not be able to see the Lord either. He would not be able to see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu either. So he was lamenting, he was deeply lamenting. And then he thought that he would go to Jagannath Puri, and during the time of Rath Yatra, when the Lord comes out on the cart, right, and when the Lord is dancing, he will give up his body under the wheels of the Rath. So it's beautifully described. He says, it's said in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it says, Mahaprabhu re rage ara dekhi Jagannath Rathe deha chani mue parama purushartha. So he's saying that Mahaprabhu age, right? Mahaprabhu will be there, and aro dekhi, I will be seeing Jagannath. And Rathe deha charimu, he's going to leave his body, right, in front of the Rath, and that will be his highest benediction, parama purushartha. So it is with this intent he reaches Jagannath Puri. This is his plan, what he will do. And when he reaches Jagannath Puri, he goes to see Haridas Thakur. And Haridas Thakur, he really lovingly welcomes him, and he tells him to stay with him. And Lord Chaitanya would visit Haridas Thakur every day. Haridas Thakur was very humble, because he felt that because he came from a Muslim background, he was socially not qualified to enter the temple. So he would stay a little far from the temple, and because of his sincerity, his humility, and his genuine love for Krishna, Lord Chaitanya would come every day to see him, and he would bring him prasad. So as Sanatana Goswami was staying with Haridas Thakur, Lord Chaitanya arrived, and both of them offered their obeisances. And Haridas Thakur got up first, and then he told Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that, see, this is Sanatana Goswami who's offering you his obeisances. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is so pleased to hear that. And he, when Sanatana Goswami gets up, he is about to go embrace him. Even though all the sores on his body are visible and oozing fluids are coming out, the Lord wants to embrace Sanatana Goswami. And Sanatana Goswami, he says that, Mora na chuniha prabhu pado tumara pae eka neech jati adhama ara kandura sagai. So he's saying that please don't touch me. Mora na chuniya. Tumar pade tumhare paaya. I'm begging at your lotus feet. Please don't touch me, because neech jati adharma. Right? I'm from a very low class background, and my activities are also very low class. And plus, kandu rasa gai. So from my body, these sores are oozing. And it is not because only he has these sores, he's feeling like that. Even when Sanatana Goswami first saw Chaitanya Mahaprabhu after he freed himself from the Nawab Hussein's service, he introduces himself to Lord Chaitanya in a similar way. Neech jati, neech sange, patita adhama. Same way he introduces himself to Lord Chaitanya. And again he's doing a similar thing. But who can stop Lord Chaitanya? Bhakta Vatsal, the Supreme Lord, the most magnanimous personality, from embracing his loving devotee. These oozing sores cannot stop Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya had said, but forcefully, it says, Balat kore Prabhu tare alongila kolo. So, using his bala, by force, he embraced Sanatana Goswami. And Sanatana Goswami felt very meek and humble. And then Lord Chaitanya, he glorified the three brothers. He glorified Srila Rupa Goswami, who had just left. Before Sanatana Goswami arrived, Rupa Goswami had been with Lord Chaitanya and he had gone back to Bengal. And his younger brother Anupam, he had recently left his body. So Mahaprabhu was appreciating both Rupa Goswami and Anupam. And especially Anupam, he said that he left his body in with such great attachment towards Lord Ram. So he was glorifying all these three brothers. And then hearing this, Sanatana Goswami, he feels even more humbled. He says, Sanatan kohe nicha vamsa mora janma adharma anya yatata amara kula dharma. So he said that I was born in a low family, for my family committed all kinds of irreligious acts. But he says that Tumara kripaye vamse mangala amara. So by your mercy, Tumhare kripaye, my whole family vamsa mangala amar is now all auspicious. And then finally, Lord Chaitanya, he tells both of them, he says that you are both experts in the devotional mellows of Lord Krishna. He says you are bhakti rase dunha prema pradhan. Both of you are experts. So what do I want you to do? He says, Krishna rasa asavadan kori laho Krishna nama. So you taste Krishna rasa asvadan. You taste the rasa of Krishna, bhakti. And laho Krishna nam. And he tells us, and he leaves. And then every day he would come and see Sanatana Goswami and Haridas Thakur. And he would bring prasadam. So now you can see that how caring the Lord is for his devotees. Because of their condition, they cannot go to the temple. But the Lord is personally coming and caring for the devotees and setting an example for all of us that what we should be doing. We all have a tendency after staying in the movement for some time. Okay, he's a devotee, everyone's a devotee, dhoti, there, tilak, everything. Uh, but how devotees should be cared for, and why caring for the devotees is absolutely essential for our advancement in Krishna consciousness. Yesterday we were discussing this point, that with Krishna there's no vertical relationship. With Krishna means to have a relationship with Krishna means to have a horizontal relationship, because Krishna is not a singularity. Right? Prabhupada gives the example that when you talk about a king, you don't talk about just the king coming on his own. Right? King means his subjects, his entourage, his elephants, his chariot, people, singing in front, his guards. So similarly, Krishna, when we think of Krishna, Krishna is with his associates, with his paraphernalia, with his dham, right? With his devotees. So if we are thinking that we can have a relationship with Krishna without having a very honest, loving relationship with the devotees, it's not possible. And repeatedly in the purports, in many of the verses, our acharyas are driving home this point that Krishna bhakti mool hoy sadhu sangha. Krishna bhakti janma mool hoy sadhu sangha. And even when Krishna prem is there, again tanho, again it is the mukhya angya. Right? It is again the essential principle. Even when one has achieved prema bhakti, devotion, the association of devotees is again the essential principle. So how important it is for us to care for devotees. And the Lord is personally setting this example by himself, by bringing prasad, by giving his association. He would sit with the devotees and he would sit with Haridas Thakur. It's described for hours. And Sanatan Goswami and discuss Krishna Katha, Ishta Goshti, chant Krishna's names, take prasadam. So wonderful. And then one day what happens is that Lord Chaitanya comes and he addresses Sanatan Goswami. He says, Sanatana deha tyage Krishna yodi paiye koti deha shanake tobe charite pariye. So he says, Sanatan, if one could achieve Krishna, deha tyage Krishna jodi paiye. If one could achieve Krishna by giving up his body, he says, Koti deha shanake. I am ready to give up millions of bodies. But he says that just, giving up this body or committing suicide is an act of ignorance. It is under the influence of tama. And he says, under the influence of tama and rajas, you can never understand Krishna. And then he tells him, he says, Bhakti vina ke kabhu nahe prema doy, prema vina Krishna prapti anya hoite nai. So he says that unless bhakti vina ke kabhu nahi prema doy. So without bhakti, there is no chance of awakening prema doy. There is no chance of awakening the dormant love for Krishna. And without that love for Krishna, prema vina Krishna prapti anya hoite nai. There's no way to achieve Krishna other than developing prema. And he quotes this verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, when Krishna is telling Uddhava, he's saying, Na sadhyati mam yoga. So he says, you cannot satisfy, nothing satisfies me. Right? Yoga doesn't satisfy me. Na sankyam dharma uddhava. So all these philosophical discussions and na swadhyayasya tapatyaga. So even the detailed study of all the Vedas, swadhyaya, tapatyaga, right? All kinds of austerities, renunciation, doesn't satisfy me. So what is Krishna satisfied? He says, Yatha bhaktir mamorjita. So it is only pure devotion that satisfies the Lord. And he says that, these measures like wanting to leave the body and commit suicide, without the will of the Lord, these are causes for sin. And a devotee never achieves shelter of the Lord by committing sinful activities. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he shares 3 beautiful verses, because Sanatana Goswami has been addressing himself as, Neech Jati, Neech Sanghe, Patita Adham, lowest of all mankind. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu addresses this. He says, Neech Jati nahi Krishna bhajane ayogya, Satkula vipra nahi bhajanera yogya. So he says, Neech Jati nahi Krishna bhajane ayogya. So having a low birth, right, or being materially disqualified in any way, he says, it does not make one unqualified, ayogya, right, for Krishna bhajan. And on the other hand, he says, you can be Satkula Vipra. So you can be very aristocratic, right? You can be very learned, you can be a Pandit, Vipra, but that does not qualify one for bhajan. Bhajanera yogya. He says, Nahe bhajanera yogya. So just because one is maybe very materially opulent and qualified and intelligent, that does not make one qualified for devotional service. And then he says that he says, Jai bhaje sei boro abhakta hina chara, Krishna bhajane nahi jati kuladi vichara. So he says, Jai bhaje sei boro. So in his class, Prahlad Priya Prabhu was mentioning how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was recognized as a great social reformer. So you can see how he is breaking all these false social barriers. Right? He says, Jai bhaje she boro. So who's actually involved, who's engaged in devotional service, he or she is exalted. She boro. And he says, Abhakta hina char. So one who is not engaged in devotional service, they are in a condemned state. And so externally it may seem someone is very aristocratic and has a lot of opulence and intelligence and influence and everything under the sun materially, but from an absolute point of view, they are in a very unfortunate position if they are not engaged in Krishna's service. And he says, this is such a beautiful verse. He says, Dinere adhika doye kore bhagavan, Kulina pandita dhanirya boro abhimana. So it says, Dinera adhika doya Kore Bhagavan. So Dine means one who is very humble. And we see that how Sanatan Goswami exemplifies this quality of humility. He was so materially capable, right? He was the finance minister in the Nawab Hussain Shah's government, and he was so capable that the Nawab never wanted to leave him. Right? He had to feign illness, and he had to basically bribe himself out of that situation. He was so qualified. He knew so many languages. He was so learned in the Shastras. But look at his swabhav. Look at the way he feels and addresses himself in front of the devotees and to the Lord. And someone in this state, Adhika Daya Kore Bhagavan. So we all seeking the mercy of the Lord. And we keep asking, please bless me, or, give me your mercy. We ask our spiritual master sometimes, or other devotees, Prabhu Kripa, Kripa. But what qualifies us for this mercy is this dinera vyavhar, this humble nature, because this is what attracts Krishna's attention. And Prabhupada writes in one he says in one letter to Krishna Das, June 1st, 1968. This is very early in the movement. He says that humbleness is a sign of progress in Krishna consciousness. A Krishna conscious person thinks always about himself as the lowest creature in the world. And the more one thinks like that, he becomes elevated more and more. Right? A Krishna conscious person is never falsely puffed up. He is satisfied with his humble position as a servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna. So Prabhupada is giving the direction that what actual progress in Krishna consciousness means. And this is the balance that we have to find, right, in our lives, of feeling genuinely fallen, but being hopeful and enthusiastic in our Krishna consciousness. So sometimes we see that, devotees, they say that, okay, I'm so fallen, and then they will keep distance. They will not come to the temple, and gradually, even the Krishna consciousness starts to fade. But genuine humility, or genuine feeling of, this feeling low, if it is genuine, that then it will inspire us to improve in our Krishna consciousness. And in one purport, Prabhupada writes about this quality. He says that this is Bhagavatam 6th canto, chapter 2, 27th purport. He says, not only one should give up their past bad habits, but he must always regret his past sinful acts. This is the standard of pure devotion. And then Prabhupada says that in another purport in Canto 1, he says, all sins unwillingly committed by a devotee are burnt in the fire of repentance. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, he says that without tapa or inner repentance, the soul cannot live as a Vaishnava. And one easy way to feel repentant is that the fact that we have this body is should be a good reason to repent, because having a material body means that that we have chosen to enjoy separately from Krishna. Otherwise, we would not have a material body. Except the rare souls who come, the Nitya Siddhas, they take on a form that appears material. But apart from those rare souls, all of us, no matter how handsome we may be, or beautiful we may be, or rich or influential, right? The fact that we have a material body should be a good reason to feel humble. And then so I have a few more minutes. I'll towards the end of this this exchange. So he, when Sanatana Goswami hears this, he is absolutely astonished that how Lord Chaitanya has revealed his heart, what he's thinking. And he tells him in such a beautiful, sweet way, he says, Sarvagya kripalu tumi Ishvara swatantra Yaise nachao taise nachi Yena kasta yantra. He says, I'm like a wooden doll, kasta yantra. Right? And you are Sarvagya, you are all knowing, and you are the independent Lord, right? Swatantra Ishwar. And you are so merciful, right? Kripalu. And the way you make me dance, like a wooden doll I dance. So beautifully he says. And then now getting to the point, this is all a build up to the point that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu tells Sanatana Goswami that how this body should be used. He says, Parera dravya tumi kyano chaho vinashite dharma vichare kiba na pare korite. He says, Parera dravya. He says, someone else's property, right? How you want to destroy? He says, don't you understand dharma, adharma? Don't you understand what is right and what is wrong? Because if you would understand that, why would you want to destroy another's property? So, and then he says that Tomara sharira mora pradhana sadhana ei sharira sadhumui ami bahu prayojana. So he says, your body is my principal instrument, right, for executing so many services. So what Lord Chaitanya is telling him is that because you have surrendered to me, right, he says, Tomara deha mora nija dhana. Your body is my property. Right? Tumi mora korecho atma samarpan. Because you have surrendered your body, because you have surrendered yourself to me, your body belongs to me. It is not yours. And I have so many plans and so many services to execute through your form. So you should not be thinking like this. And then he says in a very sweet way, that after explaining this, he tells him his plan for him to go to Vrindavan, to excavate so many of the holy places in Vrindavan, to write Vaishnava literature on Vaishnava behavior, on devotional mellows, So then he gives his whole plan to Sanatana Goswami. And then before leaving, he says, in a very sweet way, he says, Haridas kohe Prabhu, suna Haridas, parera dravya inha chahina korete vinash. So he says that, my dear Haridas, please hear me. This gentleman wants to destroy another's property. So he says, you tell him this. Parera sthapya dravya kyano na kahe vilaya nishediha inahe yena na kore anyaya. So tell him not to do anyaya. Don't do injustice. Remind him that this body is not his property. And in this sweet way, Lord Chaitanya leaves. So we as practitioners, we have this body. And Lord Chaitanya has demonstrated that whether we recognize this or not, right, as devotees we should recognize it. But even for non-devotees, the body actually belongs to God. Everything belongs to God. But as devotees, we recognize this more clearly, and the more deeply we recognize that actually everything belongs to God. Right? Isha Vashidam Sarvam. Right? That this body is a property of the Lord, and it should be used for that person who owns the body. And this is what Prabhupada repeatedly encourages us in his lectures, in his purports. He says it doesn't matter, what your background. He gives many examples. He says, I have given Brahmin initiation to people from the West, just in the same spirit as Lord Chaitanya has done it, given sacred thread based on all these principles that we just discussed. Right? And the whole idea is that we should use this body to glorify the real owner of this body. So through our practice of devotional service, we should be deeply understanding this point, that this body is to be engaged in the service of the Lord. And Srila Prabhupada has given us so many different services by creating this amazing institution. Just the variety of services, deity worship, preaching, prasadam distribution, scientific preaching, padyatras, like unlimited services we have been given. So according to our capacity and proclivities, Prabhupada says, he repeatedly says, he says, human life is meant for yajna, sacrifice for the satisfaction of the Supreme Person. We may perfect our activities, but our success lies in satisfying Krishna by our talents. So we may be perfect in whatever we do. We may be a good singer, so we may sing very well, but he says our success lies in satisfying Krishna. And I will end this is also Prabhupada. He says, he's requesting, he's saying, so our request is, he's speaking in Melbourne to a group of scientists in 1972. He's saying, so our request is that everyone with his talents should establish the authority of the Supreme. This is our Krishna consciousness movement. So thank you very much for patiently listening. If you would like to share some realizations or have some questions, I will try to answer. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Yes, please. Is there another mic or no? Okay. Yes. So Prabhu asked a very good question that I mentioned about the importance of association with devotees. So he says that how can we develop respect, in our daily dealings with with the devotees? So first thing is that we have to repeatedly hear. And Prabhupada, in all his lectures, in all his purports, he emphasizes that without hearing, uh, it's not that we hear once. Right? Most likely, what you have heard in this class or what I have said in this class, maybe after a few days or maybe even after a few hours, both of us may forget. That's the most likely scenario that happens. Right? Prabhu, kya bola? What a class. But Radha Gopinath Prabhu says, like, kya bola? So, kya bola? So, भूल गया बस वो क्या बोला में ही रह जाता है. So we have to repeatedly hear. That's our process. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. It's not that you hear once. And if you are hearing properly, then we want to hear more. Because it's not that, we heard once of Krishna and I hear, Krishna is one pastime we heard and it's over. It doesn't happen that way. We all have experience. Like after many years of practicing Krishna consciousness, now when we read the purports, now we can, wow, this is making a lot of sense. I can relate to it. So we have to continuously hear. And then especially we have to hear on those topics where we have issues. I felt that, like for me, I went through a lot of challenging situations for many, many years. So I would hear lectures where Prabhupada would always say, okay, how to handle these challenging situations. Not that I heard once and I understood, okay, now I know. You hear, you forget. You hear, you try to implement, you fail. Then you try, you hear again. Then, you rise again, you try. So this is the tapasya. By practice. So we have to practice this tapasya. We may not appreciate, but we have to practice. And we have to hear, and we have to deeply, another thing is that not just hear, but we have to reflect on the state of our consciousness. Am I really feeling respectful? Because in our modern age, that we are so pressed for time that the least time we give is for any reflection. Right after the class, we will have, so many sevas, we'll have this, and most likely by the end of the day, and it happens, even me, I hear lecture in the morning and then in the evening I try to remember, like, 90% of the points I can't remember. When you go through a heavy day at work and this and that, you come back home and you think of the class you heard, you don't remember. So you have to repeatedly hear. Again, you're coming back in the car, you hear again. So repeated hearing and practice. Abhyasa yoga yuktena. Abhyasa. We have to practice, even though it is difficult. Our intelligence and whatever our contaminated, conditioned nature is not allowing it, but that is the tapasya. Just by, saying, okay, I don't feel like it, so I will not do it, then we are not engaging in the right tapasya. Tapasya means, voluntarily accepting, something that the mind is not willing to do. So by practice, by reflection, by hearing, and by prayer, Prabhupada says, pray, endeavor and pray. So we try to our capacity and we pray to Krishna to increase our capacity. Because on our own we are helpless. So we need the blessings, we need the mercy of, and And Prabhupada says in one place, right? Uh, Actually, I forgot. Uh, he says that um, he says that um, this was in relation to the transcendental forms of the Lord. He says the transcendental forms of the Lord are a mystery, and the symptoms of these forms, which are absolutely different from anything made of mundane elements, are also mysterious. So we discuss the differences, but they are mysterious to us because we don't see anything like that in the material world. But then he gives he gives how we can do it. He says they are only revealed by his grace to proper devotees. These mysteries are gradually disclosed to various grades of devotees in proportion to the gradual development of their service attitude. So he's saying these mysteries are disclosed depending on our service attitude. So if you think, okay, by hearing, I'll memorize all the shlokas and I will, I'll quote every, line of every purport and I'll be able to achieve, Krishna's mercy. It's not possible. So by service, and Prabhupada writes nicely, it's not by service attitude. So it's the service and the attitude, both are required. It's very, the more we read in detail, the way Prabhupada uses and explains things, it's really transcendental. And it's so fine, subtle, things. He's saying by one's service attitude, these mysteries can be disclosed. So all these qualities that we are praying for, right, appreciation, everything comes by the mercy. Yasya deve para bhakti yatha deve tatha guru. Yasya prasada bhagavat prasada. Without that mercy, there is na gati, no destination. Again in the wheel of samsara chakra. Yes, please. Yes. Yes. So there is a pastime when Lord Jagannath falls sick. Right? And I had said that, the Lord's body doesn't fall sick. So even Krishna in his pastimes also, he falls sick once. And then he says, the only thing I would need is the dust of the, from the feet of my devotees. Right? So my answer to this is that if the Lord wants to fall sick, can he fall sick? Lord wants to fall sick. Right? So can we stop him? But does he fall sick because there's a problem in his body? No. The Lord's body is transcendental. So he is falling sick by his own will. For a certain exchange of ras. So he's not falling sick because, his digestion is not working properly. No. Or, he's got a bad cold or... No. He falls sick because that's his will. And why not? Why can't the Lord fall sick? The Lord is absolute, right? If the Lord wants to fall sick, he can fall sick. And by his own, by his own methodology, he will get better. So he has these exchanges with devotees, right, in many different ways. To enhance this exchange, of different ras, like the Lord. So we can appreciate at that level. Is it okay? Yes, Prabhuji.
There are days or situations when, due to our other multiple engagements, responsibilities, sadhana becomes difficult to complete though, but
Yes.
it becomes difficult to spread over the day. So, does repentance or genuine repentance in such situations, how would that help us?
Definitely, we should genuinely repent. If you're not able to keep our vows, Prabhupada says, uh, uh, acts of sin unwillingly committed are burnt in the fire of repentance. Right? That's Prabhupada's purport in. This is in the first canto when Maharaj Parikshit, when he puts that dead snake around the neck of the Brahmin, right? He feels genuinely repentant. He realizes that even before he gets the curse, he is repentant, and he actually asks. He is thinking that yes, let me suffer from the consequences of this. He even goes to that extent before getting the curse. So definitely we should be repentant if we are not able to keep our vows. Uh, but if repentance is genuine, then uh, it will propel us to a more sincere standard. And uh, see, Krishna knows our hearts, so we can't fake it. There's no feigning humility or repentance. So you can't. The way Prabhupada describes, like, even humility, he says, we often think humility means just okay, just being lowly like this. But he says to be anxious, humility means not to be anxious to have the satisfaction of being praised by others. I mean, it's like an out of the world explanation. So we should not be anxious to have the satisfaction of wanting to be praised by others. If you think of this at a deeper level, so many aspects are there in this simple statement. So Krishna knows our hearts, and we should reveal that. Sometimes we are not sincere, so we should reveal that to Krishna. That, sorry, Lord, I am being offensive. Please help me. Or if you have committed an offense, and so many offenses we unwillingly commit anyway. So every day you should be asking for forgiveness. That should be one of our daily prayers, according, like gratitude, forgiveness, strength to chant the Lord's names, properly. These, to do service in the right mood, these should be our, constant meditations. Yes. Yes. Who? So he asks a question that what about people who commit suicide? So it's explained that they suffer in the subtle body. So it is not timely for them, for the subtle body to leave the gross body. So then they stay in the subtle body and they suffer in that, and then according to their karma again they get another body. So that's why sometimes we hear like all these ghosts and these kind of living entities. Why will they permit themselves? Could be for many reasons, Prabhu. Like, I mean, every day you hear of suicides, different pressures, wrong desires, expectations not being met, being saddened by or grieved by some relationship. So many, you read the newspaper, it is like every day you hear, you know, like nowadays there's so much pressure on the youth, you know, the amount of suicides among, the youth are just skyrocketing because of artificial pressure that either, if you don't achieve this, then everything is a failure. So if you don't crack IIT, then you're a lost case. Or if you don't crack your IIM, you're a lost case. So artificial demands, artificial pressures, lack of knowledge, ignorance, so many things contribute. So it's difficult to tell exactly, what. But it is done under tamo, and it is done in the influence of ignorance and passion, these activities. Okay, last question. At 10:09. Prabhuji, can I take one more question? Last? Because he had been raising his hands for a while. So, how to improve? How to improve determination in our bhakti processes. So similar to the answer that I gave him, that it's only by practice. The more we practice, the more we get determined. There's no shortcut. By engaging in devotional service, by trying to, another thing is that we should always be meditating on improving the intent of our service as well. Right? So I'm going to chant, okay, what is my intent? What intent am I going to chant? Because that will help us advance. If our intent is right, then the likelihood of advancing will be more. Right? If the intent is not right, okay, I took a vow from my guru, so now I need to do it. I'm just doing it because, okay, I'm in a devotee family, so everyone chants, so I might as well chant my 16 rounds. But what is the intent behind that? So if the intent is, and the intent, the more we hear from Shastra, we study the intent of the pure devotees, how they are performing their devotion, with what bhav, with what intent. And we cannot imitate them, but we can pray to follow in their footsteps. We can try to practice and try to follow in their footsteps and try to pray every day to improve the intent of our services. So Prabhupada says that, if we want to advance, we have to be sincere and serious. Right? So sincere means this intent. And serious means discipline. Right? So just good intention means nothing. Right? So I intend to chant my rounds properly, but I don't make an effort. So there's a balance between intent and effort. Like there's a saying in the Bible that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Meaning that just having good intentions is not enough. So that's what Prabhupada says. If you read his purports, right, you will find this sutra. One has to be sincere and serious. Right? You'll see these words together in many of his purports. So thank you very much. I've got the sign to end. So thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Granth Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Nitai Gaura Premanandi. Hare Hare Bol.